Welcome to the FCS Edge, where we span FCS Nation. I'm Craig Haley of Stats Perform and theanalyst.com, joined by co-host Zach McKinnell of FCS Football Central on SI. Zach, we've arrived. It's week 0 of the 2025 season. Are you ready?
Craig, I don't know if I've been more ready for anything in my life. It feels like these all seasons keep getting longer. I'm just glad we got some actual football to talk about, man. So I can't wait to get into it.
So much to talk about. Of course, our producer each week is Graham Bell. You can find the FCS Edge wherever you get your podcasts. You can subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. Just search the FCS Edge. You can find our content all season long on theanalyst.com. In this episode, we will continue to set up the new season. We will preview week 0, which is this Saturday. And we have a special guest, Coach Tim Polasek of FCS National Champion North Dakota State. Ooh, we are packed with an episode going into week 0. Now, as we head into week 0, news of the Vegas Kickoff Classic at Allegiant Stadium. That's in 2027 and 2029 Labor Day weekend. And that includes North Dakota State. They're playing Montana State in 2027. And 2029 is South Dakota State opening against Montana. Those are the two most recent national championship matchups. What do you think of this new Vegas Kickoff Classic?
One, I think it's huge, Craig, that you can tell that ESPN events and some of these promoters are recognizing the impact that FCS football could have when put on the proper stage. You look at finally moving the national championship off of a Sunday afternoon competing with NFL playoff games or, playoff qualifying games in week 18. And you saw the viewership, right? It was one of the highest viewed national championships we've had, got up over 3 million viewers at one point in that game. If you put the FCS on a fair stage, a national stage, people are going to tune in. And it also shows that they're in tune with which teams are driving this subdivision right now and how important it is to have the top teams on these platforms, where sometimes, Craig, you'll have a game that is an uneven matchup, right? And it turns out to be a blowout, not a great I would say it wouldn't be indicative of what the FCS is, but you have the past 2 national championship matchups. You have big brands who are out on the West Coast or in the Midwest already, who are going to be excited to get to an NFL stadium, see their teams on that stage. And Craig, it just shows this game had USC and LSU last year in it. And we're shifting now where we're going to get to see North Dakota State, South Dakota State, Montana in this game. And I just think all it does is increase the brand recognition. And it's just another example of the FCS slowly gaining some traction in terms of respect on the national stage, whether that be TV slots, whether that be these classic kickoff games. They're just making their mark and showing people that there's good football played in the subdivision.
Yeah, Zach, you mentioned these teams that will be in the Vegas Kickoff Classic. They kind of drive the FCS. I mean, right now, they're the last 2 national championship matchups. How deep does this year's FCS championship picture go? How many teams would you say have a realistic chance to walk away with the title in Nashville come early January?
It was funny you asked this. Shout out to my guy Timothy, just did an article on this where he looked back historically on how many there could be. I mean, Craig, you usually draw the line at 3 or 4. I think I think the 2 obvious ones are North Dakota State and Montana State. And then I think I would throw in South Dakota State, South Dakota. And it's weird, right? Because I don't like to be redundant and say, oh, it's the top 4 teams from last year. But even going into the preseason, it's those 4 teams are the ones that meet these qualifications, are the ones that have the least number of question marks, the ones that have the most talent in key areas. And the funny part is you look at these 4 teams outside of South Dakota with Aiden Bauman, everybody's got a new quarterback. And so it's kind of unique in that sense. But I really do think there's going to be an interesting conversation, because I think I give you the guarantee to where I think Montana State, North Dakota State are going to be in it regardless. I know that some people question Montana State's turnover. I don't. I think they're still going to be really, really good, and they got to check a lot of boxes off that people might be overlooking. But can Tarleton State, can UC Davis, can Incarnate Word push a South Dakota or a South Dakota State out of that 4-3 spot and make a run here and get to the semifinals and possibly make a push to get to Nashville? That's going to be the bigger question. As I think, Craig, the national title picture is about the same size where you have those 2 to 4 teams. But I think what has happened is the fringe conversation has increased a little bit and become a lot more intriguing this year, in my opinion, because you have a bunch of teams that have the potential, Craig, if everything develops properly, to break that glass ceiling and break into the title picture.
It's a good point. I mean, that, six through 12 group, if you want to say, you're right. You could sit there and say, hey, this is one that can make a run. Like say in Illinois State, the year they went to Frisco. I believe they were unranked going into the season. Everything came together under Brock's back. Almost beat North Dakota State that year. This year you throw in a UC Davis, a Rhode Island, those kind of programs that fit that mold beyond the top four that you mentioned and beyond, a UIW. It will be fascinating to see if that group can expand and not just be 4 or 5 teams that are realistic national championship contenders. Now, let me ask you this. We're always talking about the FCS championship game, the Celebration Bowl. Jackson State. They look like on their in HBCU FCS level, this year's team is stacked. Just like North Dakota State is the obvious favorite for the FCS championship game. Jackson State's the obvious favorite for the Celebration Bowl out of the SWAC. Which one is more of a slam dunk to be that champion again?
I mean, the safe answer feels like Jackson just because there's less teams you're competing with, right? Because I think when you look at the Celebration Bowl picture, it's probably about the same where I think 2, 3 teams kind of come to mind as teams that can realistically make a run. And I think there might only be one team out of the SWAC I feel really confident about making that push. It's like the question mark of who gets there more comes out of the MEAC, where you have South Carolina State, you have North Carolina Central, you have Morgan State, who's kind of been on this slow rise. Then you've got the exciting pick of Norfolk State with Michael Vick and everything they brought in. So I would lean Jackson here just because I do think, and this is the X factor for me, Craig, I think Montana State's going to be right there again. And if Montana State can figure out that quarterback spot, Craig, I think they check the boxes everywhere else. The offensive line should be good. Their running back room is one, if not the best in the country. Wide receiving core, you got a few key pieces back. And I think defensively, they played so many guys in those blowout wins that you have a ton of guys coming back that played 150, 200, 300 snaps last year. Their defense should be pretty good. I'm really big on Kenneth Iden. I think he actually had a better year than Brody Grebe last year. He just didn't have the star power in his name. And so I think they're going to be really, really good. And that's going to be the difference. And you look at Jackson, man, quarterbacks back. You lose Irv Mulligan, but you've returned every significant contributor at running back, including Miller at running back, who missed last season mostly due to injury. And then at wide receiver, you upgrade by bringing Nate Rembert and Shamar Savage in, who were 2 top 10 receivers in the SWAC already. And then on the offensive line, you return a majority of your starters. Edge rushers to question, but you on the interior, you bring back Jeremiah Williams, who could have been the preseason SWAC Defensive Player of the Year, one of my favorite defensive tackles in the FCS. Both your linebackers come back. And in the secondary, they had to replace a bunch of starters, Craig, but they added a bunch of guys with starting experience, starting with Levi Wyatt from McNeese, who was an all Southland pick 2 years ago. So they check off all the boxes for me. And I think TC Taylor, Craig, does not get enough credit for how good of a coaching job he's done at Jackson. And everyone just says, oh, it was the prom effect, Craig. People who are not around that program do not understand what he was left with. They had nothing left when Prime left. They took the lockers, Craig. They took bleachers. They took players, coaches, everything. And when him and Coach O looked after that Celebration Bowl and saw what they had, they were able to flip that roster, win 8 games his first year, and they come back year 2, Craig, and walk and get to the Celebration Bowl in dominant fashion at times. Man, I think TC Taylor has done an excellent job, and I think that's the X factor. That's why I'm leaning Jackson to repeat as Celebration Bowl champs.
It didn't take the fans because Jackson State still is the most attended university in the FCS. Just amazing how they pack them in. Let's just say Jackson State has the season that we think they will. Say they went to the FCS playoffs instead of playing in the Celebration Bowl. How deep of a run would this year's team make in your eyes if going in?
Man, it's tough to say just because we haven't seen anyone play, right? But like you said, if all things are equal and they are as good as we think they are, I, so this is where I always people laugh because I kind of cheat here, but I take this route, Craig, because I've covered the FCS for a while, and this is where in like the quarterfinals, I think they could get there depending on the matchup, especially when you look at it, Craig. If they win as many games as we think they do, right? If they're 10-2 and the SWAC was going to the playoffs, they'd be a top 8 seed most likely. So they get that first round bye. Then I would assume they would probably have a SoCon, an OVC Big South, a South like a Southland, maybe a UAC, depending on the bracket. They would probably draw someone like that. I look across those conferences. There's not a ton of teams that scare me because the champion of those conferences probably got the first round bye too. So you're not facing them, probably facing the second, third place team out of there. I think Jackson can make the quarterfinal run. And the reason I say I don't want to go any further, Craig, me and you both know, and you've been covering this even longer than I have. Once you get to the quarterfinals, it's all about matchups from then on. You just have to have the luck of the draw because, Craig, if they get the 8 seed and then you get North Dakota State, it's going to be a little tough to make that run to the semifinals instead of drawing North Dakota State in the national championship, being on the other side of the bracket, and or maybe getting them in the semifinals. Like I look at that North Dakota State team and Montana State team. What was it 2 years ago, Craig, when they met in the second round? If you separate those teams, you're telling me that Montana State team couldn't have made a run to the semifinals if they didn't have to play North Dakota State in the second round? So it's all about matchups, man. I think they could easily be a quarterfinal team. I really do. And I know a lot of fans who listen to the show, Craig, are going to push back and say, SWAC out of conference play. They don't win out of conference games. They don't do this. But Craig, me and you have watched a lot of football. That team has the trenches. They have the exterior talent in terms of the positional groups and wide receiver, running back. I think they can make a serious run to the quarters, and then who knows what happens from there on.
Yeah, you get to the quarterfinals. I mean, it almost seemed like South Dakota State's their back-to-back titles, their toughest games were in the quarterfinal round. For instance, the Holy Cross game a few years back. I think maybe it solved a tiny bit last year with the additional seeding. You don't get quite as regional. Probably not going to have a Montana State, North Dakota State kind of matchup anymore in the second round. We don't want that because that Montana State team would have went far with a better draw. So I think Jackson State, yeah, I agree. They could get to like a quarterfinal. They have to overcome. They always seem to have a bad result during the regular season. It could be a win and a close win. It could be a loss. Last year they lost to Grambling State. And you look back at it, and then that's not a very good result. When you're talking how good are they, among the top teams in the nation. So. We've been previewing all the conferences in the FCS on theanalyst.com. And while we're doing that, we have something new that we're doing this year. Our Opta Supercomputer, it runs simulations, win-loss projections for the entire season. It factors in rosters, conference, strength of schedule, last year's strength of schedule, this year's strength of schedule. It really runs all these advanced simulations, gives you a win-loss projection. Graham Bell can hopefully put the projections up for us. I want to ask you the top ones here. If we looked at who's going to go over, who do you say will beat the supercomputer, and not by a win, by 1.5 to 2 wins. I mean, you could be projected with 10.3 wins, but who is going to beat the computer in your eyes in the number of wins, at least by 1.5, Zach?
So there's a few teams that stick out. The first one, and Craig, let's go ahead and piss off all the listeners because they don't love when this team gets any hype. Sacramento State is the first team I look at as a team that I think is going to crush that win total. A 6.2.
6.2, yes.
Yeah, 6.2 is very low. Now, am I buying the national title hype that some fans are giving them? Probably not. I still think it's a tough but at the same time, it's weird because when Brennan Marion was first hired, Craig, everybody loved the hire, right? Because of how highly touted he was as a coach. But we know how it is, and fans are very fickle, Craig. once you start recruiting and being very vocal about certain aspirations and how you want to do things, fans will turn on you quickly, especially opposing fans. And we've kind of seen them shift from, man, how cool is it that they got Brennan Marion? Look at all the investment. Look at all these cool players they brought into. We don't want them to be good. Like, they want to go to FBS, and they think that they can flip this roster and compete with our rosters that are made from high school and this and that. So I'm very excited, man. If Jaden Rashada hits and lives up to the potential he had coming out of high school, this team could be super dangerous, especially in the go-go offense that Brennan Marion runs. I love Jamar Curtis and the addition they had there. I thought they brought in a bunch of key defensive players, especially in the secondary. And I look at the other team, Craig. I think Southern Illinois is going to crush that over-under win total of 5.8 from the Supercomputer. I think the Supercomputer forgot, Craig. They lost everybody due to injury last year. I mean, Craig, I was talking to an insider over there. They were missing at one point like 14 to 16 starters from the day one roster due to injury last year, including their starting quarterback, DJ Williams, and including their second and third string quarterback at one point. They lost everybody, and they couldn't run the football because everyone got banged up as well. I think DJ Williams has a super high ceiling in the Valley. He brings a sort of dual threat ability along with the size, right? A lot of the dual threat guys in the Valley, like you look at like a Tommy Rittenhouse, a bit undersized. DJ Williams has that prototypical size as well. If he can stay healthy, man, this Southern Illinois team, in my opinion, Craig, is going to crush that 5.8 regular season win total that the supercomputer gave them.
Yeah, I tell you, the advanced data that the Opta supercomputer uses to give a win-loss projection takes in the best case scenario, the worst case scenario. So sometimes the numbers may seem conservative. I think you picked out a couple of great ones. I'll give you a couple more. I think Lehigh stands out, and it's a good number at 8.3, but I think this is a 10, 11 win team in the regular season. I think they're just the best team in the Patriot League. They open against Richmond, of course, which is sort of like the Daytona 500 of the Patriot League season. So that stands out to me. I think Rhode Island, the CAA favorite, stands out as being a little too low at 7.5. I think, after their run last year in the playoffs, they have a lot back, especially on the offensive line, which really takes you far on this level. So those ones stand out as well. I think you picked a couple great ones. So it'll be interesting to look back to see who was over, who was under in these the Opta supercomputer projections. But we're going to take a break. And when Zach and I come back, we have a special guest, Tim Polasek, head coach of North Dakota State. But as we go to break, we were talking HBCU football earlier. We're going to look at the 20-member preseason watch list for the HBCU National Player of the Year Award. This is the FCS Edge. Now, in many weeks, we hope the listeners are tuned in to hear what Zach and I had to say. But this week, even we would agree that you probably want to hear more from our special guest, head coach Tim Polasek of defending FCS national champion North Dakota State. Coach, we're headed to the season. How you doing right now?
Yeah, good morning, guys. We're doing good. We're fairly healthy. We're really healthy, actually. And it's been a really physical camp. I've really appreciated the growth on the staff with some of our younger coaches. We have a good team. I don't know that we're, a great team today. It's going to be really important for North Dakota State to get better every week this year and capitalize on all the opportunities early to improve.
Well, Coach, you've had your program has had a lot of great teams. It's gotten to the point where it's almost national championship or bust each season. How do you deal with that pressure as a program?
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously there's some coaching cliches out there. Pressure's a privilege or whatever. Hey, I came back. A big part of the reason I came back, from the FBS or P4 levels because of the standards, the expectations. We had an event last night, with our support and fan day. All total must have been 2,000 people, but we had 800 people that were there to precisely talk about, Coach, how are you going to win the national championship again? And I think the one thing about it is I just hope everybody's willing to go through the journey together, that your fans are there with you through thick and thin, through the whole schedule, every game that's on your home schedule. Because when we've done that and when we've improved and we come together and we're tough in November, typically we've kind of positioned ourselves to be in some big moments, and then you either make the plays or you don't. So to answer your question, that's kind of our primary focus, is staying um, in the mode that we're not on top. We're not defending anything. We have to get back to the top of the mountain, compete, improve. Tough is at the forefront for us. Valuing and respecting each of our opponents, valuing each opportunity to get better is kind of where it all starts. But truthfully, as a head coach, I really like what our plan is this fall camp. I really like how much situational tough moments we've been in. The defense, has been just maybe a little bit ahead of the offense. But quite frankly, when it comes down to it, if you give your kids a chance to win games, I think you're doing a big portion of what the title is as a head coach or coaching period.
Coach, last year coming into the season, there were some people who questioned just your secondary because you had a lot of youth back there, a lot of young guys who were stepping into starting roles. Looking ahead to this year, that's one of guys that's projected to be one of the strongest units on the team. All those guys are back. There's a lot of guys that played key minutes last year. What's been your takeaway of the secondary's development throughout fall camp this year?
Yeah, it's cool. Good question. You know, I like typical NDSU. And what I mean that is, like, we usually do start every year this way. We've got concerns. We've got issues. We're no different than anybody else, and everybody's got, in this era, some people are trying to correct those issues with new guys through the portal. We're so fortunate, at North Dakota State, 88% of our team was recruited to be Bison. So last year there was questions because those guys were young and they were inexperienced. Cam Miller absolutely carved those guys up last fall camp. I mean, safeties were out of position, that he found the open guy, he made them pay. Well, the whole flip is going on for us this year. The secondary is disguising things. They're reacting, anticipating much better than we did a year ago, especially at the safety spot. We're covering we're covering better, period. At corner and at nickel, the safety spot. Our field linebacker has some length. And then offensively, it's a little bit like, okay, who's going to be the 5 up front? How well is the quarterback going to play on 3rd and long? And so those guys in the secondary have done an unbelievable job of, on fall camp, so my voice is a little bit gone, guys. I apologize. It's just they've taken advantage of the reps they got last year. They're more experienced, and then obviously, in our program, they're bigger, stronger, and faster. And Devin Kleiman and Will Johnson do a great job coaching them. It's a strength of ours right now. But like anything, we got to stay healthy. I do like our overall depth, though. We're talking 4 to 5 deep at corner and or at safety. We're getting healthier at safety right now. So it's exciting to see the Wolfpack gelling and coming together and making some plays.
Coach mentioned Cam Miller. I mean, he led 2 national championship teams. I mean, just a great career at NDSU. We saw a lot of Cole Payton behind him, but at the same time, he ran the ball, 3 times as much as he passed it. How, tell us about Cole as a passer, and just how do your receivers, which is a great receiving core, adjust to a left-handed quarterback?
Well, the 3 seniors, obviously came in with Cole and have been around Cole. So they're definitely behind him and they're in his corner. Cole's one of our top 2 or 3 biggest, most explosive athletes on our football team. And I do feel like we have a very lean, fast team this year. And so for him to be in that category says a lot. Coach Roll really used him really well, as far as the +1 run game, get him in, make the defense have to defend that package. We have that. We've worked really hard the last, I'd call it 35 practices, including spring ball, to just, develop the drop back pass game. And I can tell you today, Cole's capable in that realm. But if we were to just ask him just to do that, we would be shortchanging our offense. Now, I'm not a big believer that, like Jordan Lynch at Northern Illinois, just you run him 25 times a game. I don't like breaking equipment with the quarterback, one of our leaders. But when we do dial his number up, it's got to be efficient and very explosive plays. And so I like Cole's progress in the past game. I'm always really upfront and honest. We've been really challenging him, in gotta have it situations, 4th and 7, game on the line, a bunch of really tough 2-minute drills. And that's the part he continues to get better, but he doesn't have that library of experience that Cam had. Last year, guys, I think this is a really cool deal for you guys maybe to look into when you're talking about who's going to be good, who did they lose. But we were like 128 to 23 in the middle 8 last year of games. And a lot of times we said to Cam with 2 minutes left before half, hey, you just go. We're looking for 3 and the possession with a kick. We need 6. That kind of mindset. And Cam was outstanding in those 2-minute drills. And today I can comfortably tell you, we may have to look at that scenario just a little bit different with, his lack of game reps, until he gets that going. That's the little bit, not concerned because of Cole, but that's the concern about game management, how we're going to project. He's a big armed kid. And we have some ability, in the perimeter. So hopefully we can take advantage of that, continue to use all 53 yards and all of our athletes, in space.
Unexpectedly losing Shamar or Marty Brown, that this spring coach, but it gives a chance for Barika to step into a major starting role and a major contributing role where he had 700 rushing yards last year. How has he thrived getting the majority of the carries now? And who are some of the young guys that have impressed you during fall camp that are going to be necessary depth throughout the season at running back?
I hope the running back group has my back along with the old lines. I mean, I really do believe we're better. We're better as a group. We can play 5 guys, and I think 3 of the guys that we didn't have last year, are more explosive. Has topped out at 21 miles per hour, for us in practice already this year. He looks much more decisive. He's mature. He came away with a ton of leadership council votes, for us. I mean, just a bunch of votes from the team. The guys love him. He's on the poster. I'm not a head coach that wants to be on the 2025 poster. It's about our players. And he's one of those 4 guys. But you look at a true freshman in Miles Mitchell, who's been here since January. He finds all the right spots. He's got really good instincts, natural ball carrier, catches it clean. And then we added DJ Scott from Kennesaw State. With their offense, they had a boatload of good running backs. And DJ didn't get much of a chance. And Sam O'Jerry, our backs coach, had recruited him before. And he's been impressive. I'm not sure that he's not number 2 right now. We're starting jobs are filling up. Roles are being defined as we speak. So between those 2 guys, it's been neat to see that group come together, and that's a new punch. Barika's totally capable of being one of the top 2 or 3, 4 guys in the league for sure. We want to not highlight him, but we want to have a guy that we highlight, a guy that carries it 18 to 20 times, and Barika will be in that role as we get into crunch time during the season. And Owen Johnson was a good player for us 2 years ago, special teams, as a running back, and he went through an awful knee injury. He's back full speed now. And so he provides a guy that can be a pass protector, a guy out of the backfield. We really like him. And then Cortez LeGrand transferred in from Minnesota. I recruited him when I was at Wyoming. The staff previous year recruited him, and he's got some he can trigger and he can go. So when you look at 5 guys in the group, I mean, we are deeper at that position than we were a year ago. Losing Marty, I don't talk about the transfers that leave a lot. Marty means a lot to me. his situation and his family situation made it really difficult for him to stay. And, wish him the best. Uh, like all things, I really do truly believe Marty should have stayed year one here and learned how to be a football player, learn the core values of this program, give a kid like that. But we're moving on, and Marty's in the past, and I like the group a lot.
Your program shared the Missouri Valley title with South Dakota and South Dakota State last year, and they have new coaches this year. You stepped into the role last year with the Bison. Even though you had been in the program, in the past, how do you find that happy medium in your first season where you're putting your own stamp on the program, but sort of letting maybe the senior groups or players returning, have a feel and a sense that they're involved in what's going on as well?
Well, I think you always stay true to who you are, as a person. That was very important to building and cultivating trust to get those 25 seniors last year to stay, right? I think once they heard my story from me, that I bleed green and yellow and that I slept on the locker room floor here for my first 4 or 5 months. I'm not saying it was easy, but all of a sudden you're captivating the crowd and then you make some phone calls. And Chris Kleiman, gave me some really good advice. Tim, you're in that position for a reason. You've seen and you've gone and done some things, trust your instincts. And so all the changes that we made, you keep the leadership council involved. Um, you ask for their viewpoints and then you just go, right? And so any change that we did make to the program last year, I think was positive. I thought our staff did a really good job. I'll give you one example. So we practiced at 9 o'clock in the morning for years here, like everybody else. I wanted to always practice in camp when we play. So we practice at 1:30, and that's just been a great adjustment. Um, I don't know. That's an interesting question. I most certainly stay really true to the traditions that are laid down by our former players always. That's really imperative here at North Dakota State. Recruiting is not our lifeblood. Our former players are. That's number one. Number two, Craig Bowl laid down an unbelievable foundation of how we practice, how we segment our drill work and our team activities. And so none of that's changed. And in our recruiting philosophy, our coaches still do 98% of the evaluation, 98% of what we do is area recruiting. Um, I mean, man, we're still running Coach Bowl's program here. It's just a different face in front and then with some subtle changes here and there. But I think you always have to be mindful of trends and trying to stay ahead of trends. And then you have to be mindful of the climate within the landscape of college football. We're working really hard. We're working really hard to stay true to the traditional look of high school recruiting, high school development, develop and grow Bison, coach them as long as you physically possibly can, because this program gives more to our players than our players ever could give it.
So, Coach, my last question, I know we got to get you out of here. The defensive line is a unit I'm really intrigued by doing preseason previews. Obviously, Toby comes back after a big year. You guys add Jack and Luliano from UAlbany, but I think defensive tackle, even a guy like Keenan Wilson, I thought played really, really well in more of a reserve rotational role last year, could step up. How excited are you for this defensive line unit, and where do you see this unit ceiling next year?
You're right. We got to find out if we're as good as Eli Mozart. We got to find out if Cody Heisman's a loss. But I can tell you right now, Jackson Dutenheffer, for a fifth-year kid, a North Dakota kid, I mean, he is faster, he is stronger, he is more sudden, he's quicker, more explosive. Short area quickness is so improved, and he's got a chip on his shoulder still and an edge about him. He's one of our best scholars on campus, and he's a leader for us. I like Keenan Wilson, man. He has a spirit and an energy for our level. You don't compare guys to, Tristan Wirfs or Aaron Donald, but he's Aaron Donald-ish. He's 6'1" and a half, 285 lean now. He's a lean 285. His first step and his suddenness and his feel for the game has improved so much. Coach Gazen did a great job of developing those guys. And then Logan Larson, and, in our program, this happens. There's a sophomore that plays a little bit. You're like, man, NDSU's deep. Who's that guy? Well, then it's his turn. And then they got to go out there and do it. So those three, I'm so excited about. And then we have a battle going on for number 4 with Zach Vanderpool, who's a kid that came into our program about 6'4.5", 238. He's 276 now. And then, like, who's going to be number 5? Is it Obald, a transfer kid that chose our program from Iowa State? He's going to have a role, but, ultimately, what is that? And then we got a true freshman kid. I won't mention his name because I don't like bringing up true freshmen on any kind of broadcast because I don't know who's listening and all that stuff. But I like that group, but we're going to have to stay healthy there. Last year we could suffer a individual injury with any top 2, 3, 4, 5 guy, and we still had 4 guys. So health and staying healthy at that spot's going to be important. And in DN, I'm so excited for Toby and Nene. He's got man, when he's humming, he's as good. He's as big of a problem as I've been around, including AJ Epinesa. When I was at Iowa, or Anthony, Anthony when I was at Iowa, who's still with Tampa Bay. I mean, those guys were just practice records, right? And he has that ability. Across from him is Kelton McCaslin, who was injured last year, who's got his burst and spirit back. And then we got 4 more DNs, believe it or not, that are all kind of really good at what they do. They're not complete players, but you guys know at our level, man, if you can get anything out of 3, 4 other DNs outside of your top 2, you're pretty deep. So I like the depth, and I really like the edge that they're playing with. We've got a hardness about us and a competitive spirit right now on defense where we're in the gray area with physicality and some scuffles, and like they're just not taking crap from anybody right now, and I like that.
Just one more question. You mentioned you remember the days where you might be sleeping on the floor 3, 4 months at a time as a young coach in the program. Take us back to your lumberjack days when you interviewed for the position with Coach Bowl and you were on the Division III level, but moonlighting as a lumberjack. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, I tell people all the time. My mom, excuse me, guys. My mom did such a great job of providing whatever I needed, but we didn't have a lot. In the community I'm from is Iowa, Wisconsin. There's actually been 2 or 3 guys from that area that have played in the NFL, a really highly competitive area. And then a bunch of people, that care about each other. And so I had some really good family friends that I got done with college. I did my student teaching, and I was like, there's just no way my approach or my energy or enthusiasm is going to fit in a high school game. I got to coach college football. So I went to UW Stevens Point. I knocked on the door. It's a team that I grew up watching because they were 20 minutes away. And I just told Coach Mish, a legend there, one of my mentors, hey, I'm going to coach for you, and you're going to have to kick me out of here. I'm volunteering. Well, when you're volunteering at the Division III level, or, you're a low-level part-time coach, you're not getting paid anything. And so you still need some money for gas. You need money. I was deferring my student loans. I was pushing that off. And so I logged in the wintertime. I basically recruited 3 days a week, and then I logged 3 days a week. And man, did I learn a lot from not only logging, but working in the steel factory in the summers when I was in college, to make some money. But yeah, it's funny. Coach Bull called me at 5 o'clock on a Friday, and I answered the phone, and hey, what are you up to, Tim? I said, well, let's not get off on the wrong foot. I just finished logging. I cracked the bush light, coach. It's about -10 out here. It was somewhere in January or February. And he said, you're a football coach, aren't you? I said, yeah, I do that too, but I log on the side. I'm making money. And long story short, I came out on the interview on that Monday, and 2 weeks later, I was back in Fargo. But I was primarily the skid steer driver. So I pulled the trees onto the landing, and then I cut the logs on the landing. I never was one of the guys that would cut trees down. And man, I'm from a pretty special place of highly competitive people that love each other. We're going through a process right now where our players and our leadership have to talk about why they play. and who they honor. And, I got to share this with the teammates. So you guys are the first guys to hear this, but I really do honor. I don't want to let anybody down from my hometown. I know I'm in a position that, it makes those guys proud and they're excited to be part of it. But I honor my whole community. Anybody that ever gave me a chance to make a little extra money or coached me growing up or had an impact. And so that's a little bit about the logging. It's funny too. I didn't have enough money to get back out to Fargo. So the superintendent of the schools bought my driver. Well, he must have sent the driver to me as I was driving, because by the time I got here, 2 days later, the driver was delivered. And so I've had a lot of help and learned a lot of tough lessons in a blue collar community about how to be a worker. But those things also allowed me to see the big picture. Man, I didn't want to work in the steel mill, and I did not want to be a logger for my life. I wanted to do something more than that. And so I woke up every day for the last 24 years. I haven't felt like I worked a day in my life.
Well, Coach Tim Polasek, we so appreciate spending time with you. We know North Dakota State's season begins on August 30th at the Citadel, embarking on potential back-to-back national titles. We wish you the best of luck, and we so appreciate the time you spent with us today.
Yeah, no, thanks for all the things you guys do and all the coverage. And if you ever need anything or any of our players, we're always available. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Coach.
Thank you, Coach.
You got it.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we will have more of the FCS Edge. Welcome back to the FCS Edge. Segment 3 is our Pick'em segment. Zach and I are looking at week 0. There are 5 games. Great way to start the season. Some very impactful games, Zach. Let's look at them and go in chronological order. First game on American soil this year, because there's a game over in Ireland. Number 5, UIW, 11-3 last year. They're at Nichols, 4-8. This is the first game, first time there's been an FCS conference matchup in week 0 ever since week 0 became regular for the FCS back in 2014. I know I'm picking UIW. Is that who you're going with?
Yeah, I went with UIW, Craig, but I will say this. I think this is an interesting game for Incarnate Word, and it's one that could serve as a trap game. But I think overall talent wise, like the thing I'm looking for, Craig, is how does this offense perform against this Nichols defense? Because the Nichols defense was actually really good last year, and they returned a bunch of key pieces. But I think that where the matchup kind of falls apart in terms of intrigue, Craig, is Nichols' offense versus Incarnate Word's defense. There's a ton of question marks on Nichols' offense, and I think Incarnate Word's defense should be able to take over and win this game. And I think that's going to be the difference here on Saturday.
Yeah, I think, with all the transfers and the quarterbacks they've had, the high-powered offenses, we kind of overlook UIW's defense. And this year it is much improved with the additions in addition to what they returned. And in fact, 2 of the players that UIW has added are from Nichols. One is on defense, Tyler Morton. In the secondary, just fabulous. Jalen Spears on offense. So I do think UIW gets it done here. It's going to be humid, though, down in Thibodaux, Louisiana. So
you're going to tell me. I was down there 2 August ago when Sac State came down, and man, it was a night game, and it was still hot.
Yes. Second game of the Saturday is Idaho State, 5-7 at UNLV, coming off a nice 11-3 season. They were 9-5 the year before. It's not the UNLV team that we were used to. Some good wins for Cody Hawkins' first season last year with Idaho State, but I think you have to like UNLV here.
Yeah, I don't think this is one of the FCS over FBS upsets that I would be expecting. I would love to see it. If we get Idaho State over UNLV, Craig, we could be in for a big year for FCS over FBS upsets, but I just don't know if that's a good matchup. And I think UNLV has been a really good program, and I think they get that one. They get this one done.
Yeah. Tarleton State, number 10 in our Stats Perform FCS preseason top 25, coming off a banner season, going to the playoffs for the first time, winning a game. They were 10-4 last year. They are at Portland State, coming off a 5-7 year. Big year for Portland State. I mean, they haven't had a winning season under Coach Barham in 10 years. You certainly have to like Tarleton State in this matchup.
Yeah, especially because Portland State's offense relies so much on Dante last year at quarterback. They don't have the same level of playmaker, in my opinion. And and even with all his playmaking ability, Craig, they still only won 3 games. I think this is actually a really bad matchup. Portland State's defense against Charleston's offense, especially with an experienced quarterback like Victor Gabales coming back. You add Tylen Hines from Hawaii. You got Cody Jackson coming back at wide receiver. You add Tyre Young from the Division II level, who was a 1,000-yard receiver last year. This offense should be really good. And I think Tarleton dominates the lines of scrimmage, Craig. Portland State's got some good individual pieces on the outside, especially at running back with Thompson. But I think this is a overmatched squad. I think Tarleton wins this one pretty convincingly.
It would be something if Tarleton's offense stays just as good, because they lost the leading the FCS leader in rushing yards, Kayvon Britton, the FCS leader in receiving yards, Darius Cooper, and yet here they are plugging in new guys. Braylon Bridges emerging, Cody Jackson will emerge out of those shadows, as you mentioned. So that'd be fascinating if Tarleton State's offense is just as good. All right, 4th out of 5 games on Saturday, the Stats Perform FCS Game of the Week. It's the FCS kickoff matchup down in Montgomery, Alabama. Number 8, UC Davis, 11-3 last year, against number 11 Mercer, the SoCon champion. They were 10-4. This is the first FCS kickoff matchup that matches 2 ranked teams in 5 years, and both are coming off playoff appearances. So this might be a difference. I'm going with Mercer. How about you?
Little surprised there, man. Maybe I'm not, but I'm really high on UC Davis. I had them 6th in my ballot. I think UC Davis gets it done. I think it's a competitive game, but to me, Craig, I couldn't get it out of my head on what the ceiling is for Caden Pennick, the redshirt freshman quarterback who will be starting this weekend. Him in this offense from Tim Plow, who just seems to elevate quarterbacks everywhere he goes. I think they're going to get real creative offensively, and I think they're going to find a way to pull this one out. I'm also very excited to see the Mercer offensive line, who was extremely young last year, Craig, went through some growing pains at times. How did they handle, even though it's a revamped defensive line, they're very experienced because they added a ton of experience in terms of defensive transfers. How did they handle that matchup? And then obviously, I just got a feeling Rex Connors is going to have a big day, man. He's all over the place. He can play in the box. He can be that deep cover guy. He can get in the slot. He just makes plays everywhere. And you pair him with a guy who I'm really excited about, and Ty Richardson from the Division III level, who was an All-American last year. Man, I think they check all the boxes. I think UC Davis gets it done in Montgomery.
Difference here between a win and a loss, how we perceive these two teams, because this is a big time matchup. I mean, how would you walk away if one, win or loss here?
I think it depends on how it looks, Craig. I don't think my opinion would change on either team if it was a close win. Like if we're talking a 3-point game, Craig, or a game-winning touchdown late, something like that, I don't think either team would shift much in my mind. Maybe more for Mercer than UC Davis. Since I'm picking UC Davis, it might not shift as much if UC Davis wins at all. But I will say if either team gets blown out here or doesn't look good, then that's a little bit more concerning. Like if Caden Pennick goes out there and struggles, Andrew Zox causing havoc, and all these new pieces on the Mercer defensive line, maybe we look at Mercer a lot different and we're saying, man, how does UC Davis hold up in the Big Sky if they couldn't win the line of scrimmage battle against Mercer? But on the same hand, man, I think Mercer is carrying a lot of pressure this weekend because there's been a lot of talk about the SoCon only getting 1 bid last year, Craig. And if Mercer goes out there and gets their doors blown off, man, that's going to impact the SoCon team later. And it might not even be Mercer, Craig. Mercer could go win the SoCon. We're going to look back, and there's going to be a team just like last year, Craig, Northern Arizona, Western Carolina, Chattanooga, all on the bubble. And the committee's going to go with the Big Sky team. And this is going to be one of the reasons why Mercer's got to carry the SoCon flag this weekend and look competitive and look confident against a really talented UC Davis team.
Yeah, I kind of looked at this matchup and thought back to Youngstown State versus Sanford a few years back, that Youngstown came in and just, did a number on Sanford, and it really didn't reflect well for the SoCon. So that's an excellent point that Mercer has a lot of pressure to perform well and get the W here. All right, last game of the day on ABC, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. It's the MEAC SWAC Challenge in Atlanta. North Carolina Central out of MEAC. They were 8-3 last year. They're playing Southern SWAC. They were 8-5 after winning the West Division last year. 11-7 lead for the MEAC in the MEAC SWAC Challenge over time. I think this is a fabulous matchup. I'm going to go with North Carolina Central getting it done. I think they have a lot back this year.
We have a lot of chalk this week, Craig. Hopefully we can live up to the name of the show, FCS Edge, and differ on more of these picks moving forward. But I'm with you. I've been kind of touting North Carolina Central as the team that I think can push Jackson in the Celebration Bowl race, and I think that would be the matchup I want to see at the end of the year because I think they're best constructed to give Jackson a run for their money. While last year, man, South Carolina State just got outmanned on the line of scrimmage. But I love what Central has coming back. Walker Harris obviously coming back. Offensive line, you have 5 guys that played over 400 plus snaps last year. Defensively, you got to figure out defensive tackle, but you look at every other level of the defense, including edge rusher. They have top talent coming back, and I'm really, really excited to see the Chris Mosley step into a starting role at running back for North Carolina Central. He averaged 11 yards per carry last year, Craig. He was very, very explosive in his limited action. But on the flip side, man, Kelby Givens has a chance to make him some money. We talk about how important it is for FCS prospects to shine when they're on the big stage. Kelby Givens has been a game wrecker for Southern for the past 2 years. He has a chance to make a statement. And you showed the HBCU National Player of the Year list. He has a chance to jump right to the top of it if he's not already there with the big performance this weekend. He's got a good matchup against a really good Central offensive line. They're going to have to find a way to neutralize Kelby Givens.
Kelby tied for 6th or 7th last year in the Buck Buchanan Award voting. He's the top returnee when it comes to the voting. Southern, though, sometimes they don't get it done in some of these big matchups. Obviously, they ran into a buzzsaw in Jackson State last year in the SWAC championship game. But do you sense that they need to really show, under Terrence Graves, that they can get it done in these big matchups?
Yeah, I think so. And you even look at out of conference wise, they haven't performed well, right? They kind of choked that McNeese game away where they had it won. Clifton McDowell and some special teams turnovers kind of lucked that one out. They get beat by Nichols, 51-7 at home last year. And then in conference play, if I'm not mistaken, I think the stat was that I heard they're like 3-16 against teams that finished above 500 in conference play since 2021. That's not where you want to be, Craig. That is not a good mark, and this is a chance. If they beat Central, man, we're looking at this SWAC race so much differently, especially with Jalen Woods coming into year. His first year as the full-time starter, started late last year, got banged up right before the SWAC championship. I think he's really talented, Craig. I like the film. The stats got to catch up, and just the overall consistency. He was super young last year, and then you got the explosive ability of Trey Holly, who was a highly touted LSU transfer, was the SEC Freshman of the Week, I believe it was 2 years ago against Army, the all-time leading rusher in Louisiana State high school history, Craig, over 10,000 rushing yards, beat the previous record by almost 2,000 yards, which is just insane to think about. They're really excited for him. He's set to start this weekend. Southern's going to have to establish the run, Craig, but it's just big for Terrence Grace and the staff to get over the hump and win a big game against a really good team because they've been taking a lot of losses to the FAMUs of the world, the Jacksons of the world, and they've lost some key games even down the stretch, even to like Alcorn, Texas Southern, PV in some of these SWAC West races. So this one would be a big momentum booster for Southern.
I asked you at the start of this episode, Zach, are you ready? I think you definitely are. Week 0.
Definitely.
Well, I'd like to thank Graham Bell, our producer, for this week's FCS Edge. We'd like to thank all of our listeners and watchers on YouTube for tuning in. Next week, we will be back for another episode of the FCS Edge. Most of the teams will be jumping into the deep end of the pool for week 1. I'd like to play one of my favorite games, pick the FCS team that's going to beat the FCS team. Maybe make that plural next week, and we'll get a couple of them. Zach, I hope you enjoy the weekend. I hope you enjoy all the games on Saturday. And again, we thank you for listening to the FCS Edge. We will see you next week.